Welcome to UNCAGED. Today we're speaking with Evan Schwartz. Evan, it's great to have you on the show.
Happy to be here, Bant. This is exciting.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to Evan. We're going to be really focused heavily on the change agent of our generation, which is AI. Evan is the Chief Innovation Officer at AMCS Group. Let him tell you a little bit more about what AMCS is working on. But he's actually done a ton more in the AI space in terms of supporting operations to embrace this moment of change, to do it in a way that will make sense for the individuals involved as well as the businesses. And then he's also reaching back to the next generation, the students that are coming up. He actually is an adjunct professor at Jacksonville University. And so I'm sure we'll touch a little bit on that world as well. Evan, great to have you here. Excited to go through this with you. I feel like every day I find a new way that I'm utilizing machine learning in my own life, in my own business. But tell me a little bit about yourself and your career.
Yeah, sure. Look, I started very young in this industry. My story goes back to the early 90s before the internet, the dial-up bulletin board systems, and I, like a lot of nerds or coneheads, whichever localism you'd like to use, I started in the gaming industry, which taught quite a bit about user experience. And of course, just about every one of today's techs evolved out of that industry from a pressure standpoint. Mm-hmm. And internet came about in 1995. There was the big wave there. And then that started to really kick off the paperless industry, the data industry, the knowledge, processes, automation, all of that across wealth industries. I got out of the gaming industry, went into the wealth industries, pulp and paper, natural gas, scrap, metal, waste, all of those, and saw that those were really the fundamental industries that drove just about every other business, rooted into something at its base, and got at an early age into developing an entire ERP system, trading of natural gas, deregulation, and all of that. And that's how I cut my teeth into the ERP system that has led for the next 35 years. And through that internet operations, being able to make that prolific everywhere, seeing massive opportunities in businesses. Where, even one of the ones I like to tell the most was with Jefferson Stone becoming Smurfit Stone. It was a pulp and paper company. It was costing them about $12 and change to get a load of wood across their scales. That's back when paper was still largely virgin fiber. And with just the introduction of a managed ERP system, operational system, whatever your term is, brought that cost down to just about $1.
Wow.
And if you're doing 1 million loads a year across your scales, that goes from 12 million down to $1 million in costs, operational costs and wood costs. And it was the same thing in the natural gas, being able to do trading of decatherms and for continuous gas. And that just sort of got me hooked because it was the creation of digital value, the ability for these systems to bring real, tangible ROI and output and outcomes for businesses. And that's carried through my entire career. Now, at the end of this journey, I'm going to say, and because I've got maybe another 10, 15 years tops in me, is AI has arrived, and it smells and looks a lot like the arrival of internet, just from an intelligence standpoint rather than a connectivity and data flow. There's a lot of parallels. And as we talked before, history is not going to repeat, but it sure as hell is going to rhyme quite a bit. So there's a lot we can learn here. And I'm seeing the same kind of challenges and difficulties with the adoption of ERPs. Is the people that put the original ERP system in place that you're running have either all retired or left. And it's a whole new generation that's all they've ever known. Is that ERP system, how it works, its process. In fact, they may not even know the process; they just know what they do. And then the system.
So let's jump into it because I'm sure AMCS is an amazing company. You guys are probably using machine learning across the board in that tool, but you've also obviously highlighted this path. So tell me a little bit more about your let's call it your AI path. And the stuff that's going on at AMCS, and then how that's extended into some of these other things you're working.
So it all stems from, depending on whichever resource industry you're in, you'll have hundreds of customers all in the same industry, all swearing they do the same thing. Not one of them does it the same way. So there is a maximum amount of efficiency you can get out of a static ERP system. Now, we spent the last 10 years working configs. I'm configuring it and flipping it and switching it so it works a little bit different for you. But you're always going to have efficiency losses there. Where artificial intelligence comes in is it smooths out the jagged edges of how these businesses operate. You can get a lot more efficiency out of the automative iterative process because AI can look at much more data and make those types of decisions that you would make, allowing you to do automation. But in this case with AI, and this is the big crux, AI doesn't necessarily take the human component out of the equation. And I think that's where a lot of folks have gone wrong. So I'm a huge proponent of a person plus AI strategy. It's heavily baked into the AMCS approach. Not only are we providing those tools, we understand your business, we're providing true context. There's a misleading view that context is just good data. It's not. It's data plus knowledge. What you do with the data has to be in there. You're still going to need what I call AI stewards, looking over the operations. But an AI steward now has an entirely different role. We were talking about developers. The only difference is I'm not using my fingers to pound out hundreds of thousands of lines of code, but I'm still orchestrating the production of that outcome. I'm just not creating the output anymore. And that's the critical shift for the human, is where our entire educational system was to make us cogs of the machine to go into a business to produce an output so that leadership could describe strategies that create these great outcomes. Well, now AI is doing the output. Humans need to orchestrate the outcomes. That's a big leap in a transformation that requires a little bit of an organizational change management to get the people to accept.
Yeah, I mean, I said it to you before the interview today, Evan. I mean, one of the things that I'm experiencing is, when I sit down with teams of developers, they're almost in a shock and awe moment of what they can do from a developer perspective, utilizing AI and machine learning. And almost to the point where it's almost blinding them to the reality of human nature, which is, one thing that we learned about the .com period was it did hit us. It offered tremendous opportunities, but to be perfectly honest, the benefits that the tech could have provided could have been implemented much faster in the .com era, right? I mean,
easily.
I remember literally 3, 4, 5 years into the whole thing. So this would be 2003, that time frame. And, there some of the largest media technology platforms in the advertising industry still used faxing,
Yeah.
And I was like, what? How is this?
It's building trust.
So what I really feel is a break here is really kind of process, operation, trust. Tell me a little bit, because it sounds like you are working to help us get over that and through that. So tell me more about your thinking there.
When it came, people really didn't know what to do with it in large. Yeah. Those that did know what to do with it, it wasn't trusted. That was the big break. I cannot tell you, say in early 2000s, everything was digitized in that company where we brought it down from $12 a load to $1, but they still had a box, physical box with printer paper, printing every single thing that came out of that computer into a box that got put into an attic that eventually rotted at some point. And it was just a trust level. So you're right. The efficiencies weren't there because the trust wasn't there. And it was because they didn't know at that time we cut our teeth on what would be the transformation model. And so what we're doing is we're saying, look, very similar to that, there was a 12-1. That's a really quick win. But you didn't get rid of all the paper. You could go further with it. We've got to build the trust. How do you do that? So we're following now a better process with the adoption of AI. Not everybody's doing this, but at AMCS, this is what we're doing. It's a person plus AI strategy. And we're introducing, along with all the tools and the technology, is what does the operator look like? What's your operating model look like? What is a steward? What does a steward do? Right? Everyone talks about human in the loop, but no one really kind of describes where that person is and what they're doing. Yeah. So we give you that view. The operating model tells you what your business is going to look like. And the adoption model explains what is the adoption journey. We are, after all, still human. There is a process of trust building that you have to go through. So if you back to the AI steward model, what do I as an AI steward do? is the first thing I need to do is get good at a couple of things. I need to get good at asking the AI to perform tasks for me to produce the output that I normally would be responsible for. If it's a developer, I'm asking it to produce code, right? How I ask it to produce that thing is important because it needs to be very good. Because there's so many ways in coding to get an output, but that's not great coding. It doesn't follow great architecture. It's poor code, right? Then the other side of it is context. Where are you getting the data and knowledge from? Because once you ask that agent something to do and you've given it the context, if it looks in your context and goes, oh, you didn't give me enough, it's not going to always go back and go, hey, I'm missing some data from you. It's going to go down into its LLM and pull that data up. Maybe 9 times out of 10, it gets the answer right and comes forward with an output that looks good. But that looking good is the third bit of knowledge that an AI steward has. You have to have a dashboard that tells you, did it produce good output? Yes or no, right? But if you want it to go into its LLM as little as possible, you want it just to use it for reasoning, not data gathering, not context gathering. Give it good context, data knowledge, give it a good task so it knows what it's doing, and then check its work. What does that sound like to you? If you've ever been in manufacturing or on a PLC system, it looks a lot like that. They call them operators, right? They stand at a station, raw material comes in, they've got their recipes, how hot is it, or whether it's punching it out, and it comes in and they measure the output of that thing. And they check its quality. Does it fall on target, conformance, absolute limits? So that's the piece that we're bringing to our industries, the resource intensive industries, is that model. Everything these agents do come with a good dashboard so you can measure it, so you can build confidence with it. Then with that confidence is how you're allowing it to make good decisions. That iteration's bigger. So going back to your developer example, if you didn't have those in place, that developer has to do a pull request on every bit of code it has to do, has to look at it, has to look at it in the big picture, right? But the more you can feed the context of an architecture, construct first, spec second, get into the output, and it's able to do more and more, your agent's iterative process grows bigger and bigger. So now rather than just building this one component that I may have spent an hour building, but it got it in 10 minutes, it can build the entire application iteratively because it understands all of the puts and takes. That's the output. So you have to start looking at your business, and this is going to hit the SG&A back office first, is what are the outputs of your SG&A business side, your back office, your HR, your admin, and then how do those connect together, like an assembly line, that produce the outcome you're trying to get to. So it's a more of an outcome-driven focus, ROI, EBITDA, free cash flow. I'm trying to get here. If I walk into one segment of my business and I just throw AI into it and it starts overproducing, I've overrun the next step, so they can't handle it, or I've drained the step that I'm feeding from and they're not going to handle it. So you're going to see about 15 seconds of good AI, and then it's going to slow down to about the speed it was
There is
before.
a famous set of literature from a group of folks that were looking at early AI and its impact on our society. And it was a professor at Oxford, and he talked about if you apply AI to the production of a paperclip.
Yeah, I remember this.
If you know this, and you task the AI to produce paperclips efficiently, suddenly, you see it following that line of thinking. And it produces, like, it essentially monopolizes the aluminum production, and it's like quite an amazing turn of event. And there have been like funny things that we've seen in kind of popular culture. If you remember that show Silicon Valley, where they create the AI, and the way it created efficiencies was to get rid of everyone.
Sure. Yeah. Unplug it. It's perfect.
But I mean, clearly, this is something that's changing businesses and making sure that they kind of set up. I really like what you're saying about rethinking how you operationalize things. I'm going to bridge it, I think, into your work that you do as a professor here. But we all think about how we came up in the business world. We often were given low paid jobs where we were process people, when we started. And whilst a lot of that work was monotonous and boring. If you did it in a certain way, you learned a lot. You learned like how a business functioned, what was needed, and then you kind of moved up. And the challenge I see now is that any young person that comes in, they won't be expected to do any of that work anymore. And so they're really coming in expected to offer another type of value almost right out of the gate. And I'm curious, how do you think about helping young people here? Like how do we
That's a
get
great
them
question.
ready?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that's a perfect question because what we're doing at Jackson University, and you can go to my website. I've recorded my 13-week class because what it's saying is we get software architects from people who've pounded out hundreds of thousands of lines of code. If we're not doing that anymore, where do architects come from? They're still important to the design. There's so many ways to make software. And if you look at solid architectural principles, they're not edicts. They're weights and balances. They're pros and cons. You adjust them to the output you're trying to get to. So how do you still get those well abstracted creators in software if they're not going to walk that path that our old education system used to do? So the goal that we're taking is fundamentals, right? So I can understand fundamentals. So let me set aside the software for a second because not everyone may understand that. And I'm going to give you an exact story, but you can overlay that thing. So everyone may have seen this where this photographer who created pictures for museums, right? He was a museum art photographer. He didn't paint it, but he took the picture in a way that provoked an emotion. And he was just in a t-shirt and he took a selfie of himself and he worked with AI and he got this stunning image of himself. You know, stark, it was white on one side, dark on the other, water dripping off, steam coming by him, just with a stern look. But he didn't have a stern look, but AI produced it beautifully.
Right.
And at first he was like, holy crap, I'm out of a job. So he had a little bit of a walk around and then he got to realize, you know, the only thing that really changed was the camera.
Yeah.
I still had to tell it about lens flaring, the effects, the contrast of coloring, lighting, all of those things. For him to have done that in a stage environment, he would have had to stage, had a model, had a pool of water, had some guy, you know, doing steam in the background, someone managing the box lights, taking thousands of pictures, and then developing those, hoping to get that one. But he was able to describe the fundamentals of photography into an AI to produce that result.
Correct.
So it still needed his knowledge and understanding of the fundamentals. If you can teach those fundamentals, which is what I'm doing in this class of solid architecture principles, and include the use of AI, that's where the stewardship model comes in. They're learning how to task it, they're learning how to give it context, data, and knowledge, and they're learning how to test the output. But
Right.
the iterative process is much, much faster to get the same output. I didn't have to set a stage and dial the lighting and put the filters in and have some guy waving smoke. I didn't have to do any of that, but I still had to describe it. And even though he could cut and paste that prompt and give it to me and I could take my picture and get a very similar result, I couldn't create a new version of that with the prompt without me understanding the fundamentals. So now students need to come into the workforce deeply understanding the fundamentals and the skills to drive AI through prompting, context, and dashboarding to get the output, know what good looks like, be able to test it against those fundamentals, giving us the ability to produce that output cheaper, but I still need those people overseeing it. AI is not going to sit there by itself and go, you know, what would be a good app is I'm going to go build this web app. You
Yeah.
still need humans to have that demand on the
Right.
other side.
Let me challenge a little bit because
Go for
I think it's a really interesting paradox we have here,
Okay.
which is certainly in the dot-com era, there was a perspective, a bias. It benefited me in my career because I was like the first digital web guy in my company, right? I think most people that are Gen X, that was pretty much what happened to us. But you know, that was kind of a generational thing. That was the older generation kind of saying, I don't understand this. You're the young person here. You figure it out. This is more relevant to you. You do it, right? Whereas what you just outlined is kind of this thing where, let's say it's the photographer. Now, that photographer that you're outlining, he is a veteran. He's been taking pictures for 40 years. He understands everything about what a great photograph should be, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And the challenge, I think, for young people is they don't have that perspective. They don't know what good is. They don't
But
know
that's the
what
whole
great
point of
is,
educating them,
right?
right?
No,
So
no, I
that
know,
guy
but
would
how do
start
you
a class.
get that? I guess it's kind of like the expectation for a young person is, in the past, has been like, be competent, do your stuff as well as you can. And then the older folks in the company, or the people that will have more perspective and more macro thinking, can kind of guide it, right? Because they've seen this play a million times with a customer or with an ERP system, et cetera. But in some ways, those young people have to have those million times off the bat. They need to understand
But
it
they
to
don't
that
have to
level.
write the
Yeah.
code, and they don't have to snap the picture with a camera. They need to see the result and gain experience. And their ability to gain experience is far cheaper, far faster. They still get the photograph, and they can
Yeah.
still work with a senior to go, yeah, but if you get this contrasting lighting, or if it looks like this, you're going to evoke emotion. Let me show you. I can
Right.
still learn the same things without having to have a camera with a million different lens types. I can still
Yeah.
learn the fundamentals of architecture without having myself hand typed out hundreds of thousands of lines of code. I can
Yeah.
still get there. The experience didn't go away. The speed at which that experience can be gained and that knowledge can be gained is because the output is being delegated down to the AI.
Yeah.
But what's going to be great, and we're not there yet. So this is me. I've gone away from here's the approach to here's me pontificating. Is they're going to be able to do things that the old guard, us, wouldn't
Can't do.
think to ask?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
we were trapped in a box of I could only do the things that physics allowed me to do with a lens. And then the young group's going to go, well, thanks for teaching me all that, but I can now create lenses that can't really exist.
Yeah.
And I can create new
I
things.
think that is such an amazing point. I hope people really grok that. So when we talk about prompting, we've all played around with LLMs. We understand what prompts are. But there will be questions and there will be questions. There will be ways of approaching that will be so much more effective in
Yeah.
terms of delivering the results that you want and structuring a lasting solution. And I really love that, which is if we can provide it kind of, basically for me, it puts such a stress on critical reasoning,
It does.
which is
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. That abstract thinking.
yeah, right. Like, how do we get people to really be deeper critical reasoners in a way, and it's probably an area that we're going to have to triple down on in terms of the next generation for sure.
So we learned it the same way, right, Ben? So we
Yeah.
learned it through fumbling and face planting. There is no change without pain, period. If there's no pain, why would you change anything? It's
Yeah.
just the approach, the cost of testing something is going to go down. So we're
Yeah.
going to generate an entire generation of people that can test things that we wouldn't even consider. Just think about the innovation we've seen in the last 2 years in the medical industry. They're trying
Yeah.
and testing things in materials development that is a lot easier to simulate and walk through and test than it would have been for us. It would have been cost prohibitive. Ergo, we get stuck in a box. I think that's going to be the revolution. And you're going to have to do the same thing. But because there's still a lot of us in these industries and businesses, going back to AMCS for a bit, there is a two-step transformation. Layer the AI to do and take some of the high-cost efficiencies out as a step one. Get in there and get some low-hanging fruit. Get your ROI, because otherwise leadership's not going to invest. Then you're going to have to reinvent the way business works, just like
Yeah.
internet did. I was there when we started talking about paperless and stuff, and the businesses are like, so what? I still got all the cabinets with paper. I still have all this paper process. I still have to punch a hole in it. We're still having to tear off all this perforated ends. Your internet, Mr. Wizard, didn't do anything for me. And it took some change in the way that those businesses operate for that value to manifest.
Well,
I
we
just
used
don't
to
think it's
joke
gonna.
about it. We used to joke about it in the advertising world. So, I was one of these digital ad guys, And when I started out in my career, I was the last person to present in a big business pitch, right? So all of the senior guys would present, and then they'd be like, and here's Bant, and he's going to tell you about, this new thing. This is called digital advertising, and we think it can work for your company, right? And I would get my 5 minutes at the very end. By the end of my ad career, I was the first person presenting. I was the presentation, right? Nobody wanted to know about any of the old stuff anymore. And it was just kind of like, it's shifting. The AI story, I think, is much more fundamental because it's exactly what you said. It challenges the way we do business and
That's right.
challenges the whole operational structure. And wow, I mean, I'm really happy that you're out there, Evan, making this happen. We're going to need a lot of help on this stuff going forward. For sure. Well, listen, I mean, if there's somebody out there that wants to learn more about what you're working on, where's the best place to find you?
So the single best place to keep up with what I'm doing is evanjschwartz.com. We post everything there. If you're interested in the professional journey, go to rkarma.com. If you're in the resource intensive industries, go to AMCSgroup.com. We have all of that available to you. Jackson University is evolving and teaching that next generation. We're looking for maybe 2 to 4 years before we're graduating what I would call the first AI steward. So this is sort of a knock on the door to businesses. You're going to have to build this in-house for at least the next 4 years before higher education starts producing them. Yeah. So get educated. And I would offer this warning as we're wrapping up. My biggest fear right now is that the us's of us that have been the greatest producers of business, we really understand this spreadsheet. We're very good at PowerPoint. We're very good at doing analysis. We've wrapped our identity around our outputs so much that to hand that off to AI is a tall task because my value is tied to this output. Getting them to shift to outcomes is a specific journey, right? So find me, find others. I'm not the only one talking about this. Get someone to help you do this with your people because your strongest producers make the best AI stewards for the same reason why that photographer is a good AI steward. He understands what good looks like intuitively. He had to do it once by hand. So until we've built this model and understood these processes, we can't just sacrifice our best producers because they don't understand or are struggling to make the shift from outputs to outcomes. So wrap your arms around them and carry them on this journey.
Excellent. Evan, thank you so much. What a great last word. Thank you so much for being on the UNCAGED show today. And we look forward to having you back.
Fantastic. Thank you, sir. Enjoy.
Cheers.